And looking at the minutes, any corrections or changes? All right, seeing none, we'll consider those approved. All right, next thing are the public hearings. And first up is variance number 2021-38, side yard setback 502 6th Street East, Matthew Hyman. And it looks like Justin's got a report.
This request doesn't require a public hearing, but we typically do allow for comments to be made, and the applicants here who would like to speak to the application. The City Council acts as the Board of Adjustment with a recommendation from the Planning Commission as directed by City Code. The request is related to the required side yard setback for sheds and garages that are in residential districts. The subject property is highlighted in yellow on the screen. A separation of at least 10 feet is required from the property line along a right-of-way. The right-of-way for Bailey Street was originally 100 feet wide, similar to Vermilion Street, but 33 feet of it was vacated in the 1940s. It currently contains a fairly narrow stretch of Bailey Street, which is a one-way, multi-use path, and a railroad spur. And this is a close-up of the property. The original right-of-way used to go from the black line on the left to about kind of maybe where the fence is on the property, more or less. And now the property line follows the edge of this red highlighted area along the edge of the tracks. This map shows the general setback requirements for a garage or a shed. In the front, it's not allowed in the front yard. And then the interior side has a 5-foot setback along with the rear, and the exterior side along a right-of-way is double at 10 feet. This is a survey with the proposed improvements on it. The applicant is proposing to do an addition onto the house, including a new attached garage, along with this proposed detached garage on the southwest part of the property. The proposed setback would be as little as 3 feet 10 inches from the property line. This would place the garage about 6 feet 2 inches from the east railroad track. The proposed setback from the center line of the track would be 11 feet, according to the numbers that I was able to read off of this plan. Notification of the request was sent to property owners within 350 feet of the property, including the Canadian Pacific Railway, and we haven't received any comments at this point. This is a photograph taken from the Bailey Street area, looking at the end of the driveway and the location on the right where the garage would be located. And this is a depiction from the applicant showing the reasons he's asking for a variance. On the left would be if there was a variance setback showing that the garages would be lined up well with the existing driveway, especially on the right and the left. It notes that it would be improved access. On the right, it's showing the required 10-foot setback and showing that the garage isn't lined up ideally on the right, and on the left it makes it a lot more difficult to get in, having to turn at an angle from the driveway and go in there. And this is a map provided by the applicant showing other sheds and garages in the area that are substandard setbacks, either less than the required or probably over the property line in some instances. So while that does show that it's common in that area to have substandard setbacks, all those buildings were presumably built there before setback requirements or under different setback requirements. And Also, it doesn't appear that there's any on the east side of Bailey Street that are encroaching in that right-of-way. Currently, the setback, or that east side of that right-of-way is, the property line is pretty far back from the actual street because of the railroad track and the path. But as time goes on, the configuration could change again if that track was removed and that right-of-way was changed. The street might be very close to that property line too. Must not have saved. I was just going to show the aerial picture again. So variances are deviations from the strict interpretation of city code. The Board of Adjustment and Appeals may issue a variance upon determination of findings of fact and conclusions that support that the variance and those requirements are found in Chapter 3002 of City Code, which is in line with the state statutes guiding land use law for cities in Minnesota. The basic spirit of the requirement for those findings are that a variance is necessary as the only means to put the property to use in a similar manner to other properties, and specifically that the strict regulations, if they were carried out, the physical surroundings, shape of the topography or land would create a practical difficulty stopping them from making the improvement. Staff was not able to determine any issues with the land itself. There's alternate ways of fitting this garage on the site. Even in the applicant's depiction of the two scenarios, whether a variance was granted or not, you could see that the building would be usable and could be accessed and could fit on the site. Alternately, it could even be at a right angle, 90 degrees from the driveway, which is the exact configuration of the detached garage that they currently have. This garage, could be set to the east of the driveway and accessed that direction. I believe the applicant said that could require the removal of trees, but I believe looking at the proposal, there's a, where's my picture? Well, it doesn't show up in this picture, but you can see this tree here would have to be removed in order to put the garage where he's proposing currently. So it looks like no matter which location the garage would be put in, the tree would have to be removed. And that also the code requires findings of practical difficulty, and that the issues are not caused by the current or past owners of the property. There's a couple of impacts that were caused by previous owners. One of them is, a previous owner placed the driveway along the property line, not taking into account if they wanted to put a garage at the end of the driveway that it wouldn't meet the setback requirements. Also, a previous owner had relinquished their rights to the property that the railroad track is on, losing some of the southwestern property when that right-of-way was vacated. And that a practical difficulty is not present if the proposal could be reasonably accomplished by abiding by the ordinance requirements. And that goes back to the garage could fit on the property with little issue if with meeting all the setback requirements. So staff is recommending denial of the variance because of those reasons. And that granting a variance based on the present conditions of the site, not having any findings to justify it, could easily confer similar justification to other properties. It's fairly common for people to have, oh, it's down, have garages that don't meet the setback requirements. And when they start to deteriorate or they want a larger one, they'll come to City Hall with plans to demolish and replace it. And they'd like to either reuse the original foundation, or they just don't want to take up any more of their yard, and they'd like to maintain that 0 setback. And they are not able to because they have to meet the setback requirements. And so they're required to abide by the 10-foot setback requirement. In some cases, it means they have to adjust their driveway or alternately change their plans, maybe have a side-loaded garage or something. But if there were findings that could be determined to support the variance, staff would recommend that any approval would also have to take the staff's recommended conditions that are in the staff report, which are mostly fairly common conditions that we place on approvals. So with that, I can stand for any questions. Otherwise, I know the applicant's here and would like to speak to the issue.
Okay, thanks, Justin. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. And Mr. Hyman, if you want to speak, you can go
And
ahead.
just for clarification, it's not technically a public hearing.
Okay, we'll open the untechnical public hearing. Applicant, Mr. Hyman, you can go ahead and speak.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
I printed off a few things that kind of highlight some of the points we're trying to make. I got 7 of them, so if you guys don't mind sharing. We have so many people already on board. And just to start, just so you, my personal history, I'm a project manager for the federal government, so I'm used to this kind of following rules and enforcing them. And I've looked at a lot of different options on laying it out, and we kind of came to the conclusion that getting it on the southwest side of the property made the most sense. And I'll get into the details of why that is, but we looked at a lot of different options, and it just didn't really fit the property aesthetically primarily. So I went through Justin's notes on the arguments or the sightings within the city ordinance. And the first one is the particular physical surroundings result in a practical difficulty. Let's see if I can play with your picture here, Justin. So one thing that Justin pointed out is the tree on the southwest corner. We actually didn't want to take that down. We fought since 2005 to try to save that tree. It had grown as a trident, and per the recommendation of the city arborist, we tried strapping it and saving it, and we lost it this year. It had split all the way to the base, and I had no choice but to take it down or otherwise wait for a windstorm to do it for me. So that was part of what drove us to really identify this location, because we didn't have a tree there anymore. As you can see from the picture, we have a lot of trees, and we've actually removed almost a dozen since we moved in to try to save them, partially from the arborist recommendation, partially because I like grass, try to open it up a little bit. And then another thing that is one of our, so the orientation of the home, the mature trees, the proposed attached garage, which is going to basically replace the existing garage in the same footprint. The driveway that was existing since 1945-ish, 46, and then the railroad itself are all physical limitations that we're trying to work around, and then trying to keep as much green space as possible, because we do use our yard a lot. The front's kind of for the kids and the back's kind of for the adults. I have a fire pit and a patio back there that we've been using for 10 years. The second point was item 2, a unique tract of land not applicable to other property. So I think the first picture and the 6th picture kind of highlight this pretty well for you guys. It's a GIS picture off of Dakota County GIS. And I pointed out what really makes us unique is that we are the only lot in the entire city of Hastings that our front door faces a non-primary street. I don't know if I'm using the terminology. We're 6th Street East, 502 6th Street East. My front door faces Bailey Street. And it's been like that since the 30s, as far as I can tell. And to try to reorient the garage in any other manner, I would have to basically remodel my entire house. I'd have to put my front door where our bedrooms currently are. And we did a project back in 2015 to completely renovate the house and bring it up to current standards with a feel of historical. We added a lot of character back into it, hardwood floors, that kind of thing. So it doesn't really warrant redoing the house to try to fit the garage in any other location, the detached garage or the attached garage in any other location than where we're trying to propose it. So I looked in a bigger picture, like I said, there's 20 properties that are actually abutting the railroad. Basically, I think East 500 is right across the street from us, all the way down to basically Kennedy. There's a whole bunch of houses that abut the property line. We're the only one that it's actually our front door. Everybody else is either their side yard, which is the two houses on 7th Street, and then Mr. Carlson across the street from us, and then another gentleman down on 8th. Everybody else, it's their backyard. So their houses are rented where the front of the house faces the street, and they have the ability to have a detached garage behind their house, accessible on the side of their house. We're forced to drive in front of our house. I don't have any other way to do it. And then historically, we could have accessed the alleyway, but that was abandoned. I don't even know how far back when, but we put in a request for a variance or a vacation about a year ago, and it was approved, as you can see on the property lines. So I'm now completely cut off. An unintended side effect of what we're trying to propose. Item 4, the detrimental public welfare or injurious to other land improvements. Obviously, there's nobody next to me besides the railroad. Building a garage there is not going to hurt anybody but the railroad, realistically, and they don't really have an interest. When we were trying to figure out the property lines, we contacted them several times, and they didn't even really want to talk to us. They said, we own 14 feet, that's it, we're not interested in whatever you're doing. So I kind of thought through a few different options, and really there's two things that would happen if the railroad ever was vacated. And, you know, precursoring that, the mill would have to shut down, the railroad would have to give up the property, it'd have to be abated for whatever chemicals are in there. And then it would either go back to the city, which is option A, or it would go back to the abutting property owners. And that's something, you know, forecasting way down the road. For us, the impact is just a small little wedge. Whether or not it would vacate back to us only catches that little southwest corner. And what I'm trying to do with the garage, just where the cars are parked right there, you can actually see the black line, which is approximately where it would be if it was squared off. If the city ended up keeping the property, presumably it would be to put the bike path where the railroad track actually is. That would have hardly any impact on what we're proposing right now. We just have a garage 5 feet off the edge of a bike path, which arguably could actually be a fence right next to the bike path. So the way we plan on doing it long-term is the garage would actually be our wall, and then the fence is gonna, you know, pair off the south side. So long-term, I don't really see how it could possibly impact any future planning of that area, unless there's some major renovation project, a 50-year plan that I don't know about. Actually, and you can see that, I think it's like picture 2. It was a quick and dirty drawing I tried to do at work today. Argument 5, item 5, proposed variance, congestion of public streets and danger of fire. The intent of most variances, I understand them, goes way back to the Chicago fires and, you know, England and that kind of thing, where houses were touching each other. And once they started on fire, the row house just kept going. This building's off by itself. If it started on fire, it's not gonna burn anything but itself and maybe our property if it happened to jump that far. And we're gonna be well beyond the 6 feet that's required by the city code. So as far as I can tell, item 5, we meet all those requirements. We're not adding congestion to the public street because we're not any closer to it than we would possibly be with a bike path anyway. And from what I could tell when I did that drawing on drawing number 2, it's a little hard to tell, but the picture on the left, that's considering parking on both sides of the street. So it'd be 48-foot wide street, parking on both sides with a 2-lane road and a bike path existing, and it's still, my garage is still 5 to 10 feet, or 10 to 15 feet away from the edge of the road line. So the item 6, variances in harmony with the intent of the ordinance. A couple things that I noticed on the aesthetics and then the future right-of-way. So I already talked about the right-of-way, but the future aesthetics, if you look at picture 3, I drew, and this is just a quick and dirty eyeballing at best guess, but I used my fence that's existing in the back as kind of a rough alignment. And that difference in 5 feet between a 5 foot offset, and sorry, I want to clarify that too. I originally was asking for a pretty tight offset, 3'10", and that was intended to like touch the required distance I'm supposed to be from the track. Proposing today to amend that to 5 feet, just to give us a little more buffer there. But standing on the bike path as is, I took this picture this morning, you can't tell the difference. That 5 feet is so minuscule for anyone else. No one would have a clue that there was a difference between if I put it at the 10 foot offset or the 5 foot offset required by or the 10 foot required by the code currently. And then aesthetics wise, if you look at pictures 4, 5, and 6, in 1996, that picture and the one that's shown in 2005 is a picture that Justin had pulled up on the screen earlier. I'll go back to it. So that picture's somewhere prior to 2015. We did a massive renovation, which you can see on the bottom of the photos. We tore that little tiny 7x7 entryway off, added an 8x14 onto it, and then a full covered porch. And in addition to that, we renovated 80% of the inside of the house, hardwood floors all around, insulated the whole thing, rewired the whole thing top to bottom, and then added some rather ornate trim throughout the whole house, including 1920s doors that are all restored to original. So we've invested a ton of money into just improving what was originally a tiny little shack. I think the original footprint of the house is 400 square feet, and it's been added on to 9 times, and we corrected most of that. So in picture 6, what you can see is kind of a rendering of what I'm envisioning the garage to look like. It's going to follow that trend. We plan on replacing the siding on all the structures, installing LP Smart Side, more paint, more color, get rid of that drab white vinyl that's been on there since sometime in the 80s or 90s, I'm not even sure. And then adding a lot of character with different roof pitches that kind of fix all the different roof pitches that are on our house currently. And then, different textures to add to it to just give it a little more character and charm to improve our property. And then picture 7 also just shows some elevations. And it also shows what I'm actually asking for a revised request is to go from 10 feet to 5 feet. It actually shows the Minnesota Statute 219 that does apply to, I think I wrote it down in here somewhere. It applies to actual private property as well as the railroad itself. Any structure, there's no structure can be constructed within 8.5 feet of the center line of the tracks. And that applies to private party and corporate industries. Let's see where I'm at. Item 9 on it was, this one was a little kind of hard for me to get my head wrapped around just because of the way it's worded. But the practical difficulties, and I kind of highlighted on, created by persons presently or formerly having an interest. And really my question to this committee would be is how far back do you go on that? This building's been sitting in its current orientation since 1871. The railroad purchased the land from Julius Pansy back in like 1890, I think, roughly, and it's been hodgepodge together. Its current layout hasn't changed much since the late 50s, early 50s, actually probably early 50s. And other than what we've done on the inside and the front of the building, nothing's changed since then. So I'd ask how far back do you go, because it has created a practical difficulty for us to do anything besides a massive attached garage, which I don't want to do. Primarily for aesthetic purposes, the house is only 1,200 square feet, and if I continue to add a giant garage on there, it's just going to look ridiculous. I'm trying to avoid that. And then the last one is the essential character of the locality. What I pulled up before, that I actually sent in, just kind of shows the whole neighborhood is a bunch of small houses on small properties with tiny little garages, either abutting or over, or in some cases, like on the just northwest of us, it's two properties split, or a property split in half, and 2 garages that aren't even the same owner almost touching, actually literally touching each other. Roofs are 6 inches apart. you know, it's not doing anything egregious like any of these buildings. I'm really just trying to shift over farther than the 10-foot that's required so I can actually drive a car into the, what would be the east door. I park in that spot every day on the driveway, and it's already kind of a hairy, just backing out. If I get a picture of that one. On the top left corner, you can see kind of where the edge of the building that butts out a little bit. That's where I park every day, and just to make that turn, it doesn't really show it well in the picture. I gotta be really careful not to hit that fence. And you put a 16-year-old, which we're about to have, you put a 16-year-old in the car backing out of, they're guaranteed to hit that fence. And then just, you know, not paying attention to what you're doing, you're probably gonna wreck that fence. So we've tried the layout several different times, and this fits the property best as an accessory structure after adding the attached garage. And then I already made the point that I had a note down here that I'd originally asked for a 3-foot 10-inch setback, and that was intended to touch that my drip line on the edge of that railroad setback. I'd like to push it back a little bit just to give us a little buffer room there, and meet the intent of any other lot as a 5-foot side yard setback. And then the detached garage itself is going to be 890 square feet roughly, so it's well with under that 1,000 square feet. And you had mentioned that we have to comply with, I have to look at what you wrote down here, but we have to comply with the requirements of the code. I think I grabbed the wrong paper. Actually, I didn't. Here it is. So there's 4 different items you had listed. So comply with whatever decision you guys make today, which hopefully is the 5-foot setback. 1 year, absolutely. We were ready to go last year, and we found out that we may or may not own the property, so we had to hire a surveyor. Had a loan and everything ready to go, and actually already submitted our blueprints in. I've since changed them, so it was a blessing in disguise, and then obviously material prices. And then all the other requirements for an accessory structure in 155.5 of the, we will comply with it. We're under 100,000 square feet away from the adjacent building. Actually have a little storage shed that would make us non-compliant, that would go away. So we intend on meeting all the requirements of the code. So with that, I think I have exhausted all my points, and if you have any questions, I'd be willing to take them.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners? Want to have a discussion first, and then if we have any questions, invite them back up to answer those. Okay, you go ahead, have a seat. We're going to have a discussion here, see if commissioners have any questions or discussion. Anyone? No? Oh, there we go. Commissioner Tyken.
Just, nobody wants to talk. So Justin, just so I get this clear, the 10-foot is because it's actually a street there? That's correct, right? That's correct. And so if we did something with that street, they bend in the railroad and we widen out the street, we'd want the setback because it wouldn't look like it's a railroad street, it'd be street.
Yeah, I mean, that whole right-of-way area is the area intended to be used for the street or transportation. And so in the future, it could be totally redesigned and look like any other street if we needed more, just change it back to a 2-way road.
But there's nothing in the works as far as abandoning that
No,
road.
there's nothing, and
it's-
it could end up being like this, for
a long
hundreds of
time.
years, but.
Yeah. And so if it was a side yard, it would be a 5-foot setback, correct?
If it was a side yard abutting another property, it would be 5 feet.
It would be 5
yeah.
feet, that's, okay, I was just making sure I understand this. I really don't have any questions, like, if anybody else has any questions or comments.
Okay, commissioners? Commissioner Romans?
I guess just to put a little conversation here, as you know, Gino, or Mr. Chair here has gone through quite a few times through the practical difficulties and going through the process here. I kind of get stuck up on the practical difficulty of, highlighted by the staff under, on the, looks like the second to the last page, where under one, where it says a practical difficulty is not present if the proposal could be reasonably accomplished under the current ordinance requirements. And they highlight that the applicant could accomplish the proposal under the current ordinance requirements. So I get the inconvenience, and I sympathize that it's a pain. But that the structure could exist regardless of the ordinance is kind of the process that I'm going through, at least. So I just kind of wanted to play that out a little bit so everybody knew the thought process.
Thanks, Commissioner Romans. Commissioners? Commissioner
Thank you,
Tyken?
Mr. Chair. So just a comment, I agree. You know, that it is a unique property, but, and, you know, I think I've seen one other variance come through in my time here, which was a totally different circumstance. The garage could be put at the 10-foot setback, you know, and it's not, it's the operating owner's choice of how big of a garage you're gonna make and what style that is and all that. So it's not anything that we're enforcing on them, that they gotta build this certain size garage in this certain place. We're just asking that you go by the current rules, and I get it. It's an old neighborhood, and there's a lot of non-compliance in that neighborhood, but this is a chance to bring it up to standard. You know, as other property owners would come before us, if we, you know, we had that training a few weeks ago. If we make an exception for these people, then we have to make an exception for every other person coming down the road, and we'd be in the same situation we're in now in 50 years because of that. So I struggle with reasons to approve it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Tyken. Go ahead. Any other commissioners? Or any other questions? I'm sorry, commissioners. Any comments? Anything else? I just had one question, if you want to go ahead, just so that we can hear you on the mic. Is on the new structure, the reason for the 9-foot garage door versus just a standard, just a regular garage door across? Standard 2-car garage door. The picture shows the left one is a 7-foot and the right one's a 9-foot or something similar to that.
Yeah, the idea behind that was, I mean, we bought a boat this year, and it's actually a little too large to fit in any garage I could build on the property. But the idea would be for the future homeowner, you know, we're not gonna live forever, would be to have an ability to actually get a decent-sized trailer in there, or, you know, a small motorhome, that kind of thing. We would actually need a 10-foot door to get our boat in there. It's just too tall when it sits on the trailer. And with the limitation of 10-foot sidewalls on a accessory structure, it just doesn't work. And then I do a lot of woodworking, so I currently have barely 8-foot walls right now, and I can't hardly, you know, spin a piece of plywood around without whacking something. So I was trying to look forward to getting a little more headroom when I'm trying to work on projects in there.
And so these two garages would be in addition to the existing single car, so we essentially would turn into a 3-car garage, total property.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the single car garage currently, if we completely gutted it, we can get a car in there. But I got, you know, some shelves and stuff like that. And yeah, it's even too short to comfortably get out of a large, you know, and a large SUV won't even fit in there. My car currently, I have an Impala, would fit in there fine if I completely gutted everything out of it. But as it is right now, you can't even open the door once you're pulled into there. So the idea was to attach it to the house and actually do a couple different things. Our only access to our basement currently is a hatch in the floor. It's an old dirt crawl space with a utility pit down there. I've actually had the maintenance guy leave because he wouldn't go jump down in the hole. So the long-term plan, I didn't put it on these plans, but is to actually install stairs into that garage so we can get down there and, you know, retire at that house. It's basically single-level living with a 2-step to get into the building. And the idea was add stairs, concrete the floor, that kind of thing. Actually get, hopefully, depending on where the rock bed is, try to get down 7-8 feet and actually have somewhat of a basement under the house. And then one point, I don't know, it's kind of a loose point, but I think I put it right at the very end. You know, Justin, you pointed out, when we were trying to figure out the property lines, we didn't know if the railroad was an easement or if they actually owned it. And in 1870s or 1880s, when it was actually sold by Julius Pansy, the railroad actually owns that property. So loosely, they're actually for that little wedge of our property, they're actually the corner lot, which is where we're trying to build the property closer than that 10-foot setback. And if the city did vacate that little wedge when the railroad eventually was abandoned, only the north, it was like 25 square feet of the building actually would end up being within that 10-foot variance after it's realigned. Let me show you the picture here. So if you draw, you can barely see, I don't think it's on this one, but if you draw a straight line down from where the survey marker is at about the center of the property, straight down to the corner, that little wedge of the garage is all that actually encroaches into that 10-foot offset. The rest of it would be in compliance, and I'd measured it on AutoCAD, and it was a little over 20 square feet, so pretty minor impact.
Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioners, any final questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Halbert?
I'll make the motion to deny the variance 2021-38.
Okay, so we have a motion to deny. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Roman, second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All in favor, which would be a denial, say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed actually would be, where would want to be on that? Well, the motion is to deny it, so all in favor say aye.
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 Okay, aye, opposed? Okay, the motion to deny carries.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. So the item for recommendation of denial will go to the city council on November 15th for final action.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming. Next on the agenda, City of Hastings Comprehensive Plan Amendment 2021-45, mixed-use high residential, 2nd to 4th Streets west of Bailey Street. And John with our staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Planning Commissioners. Tonight, we have a request to amend our comprehensive plan in a couple of different ways. First of all is to create a brand-new land use category, which is termed mixed-use high residential. The second move would be to redesignate areas to this mixed-use high residential district. So I'll go through a little bit of background of the comprehensive plan, what the request is, and have any questions at that point. So our comprehensive plan, is, I think you're aware, is something we just adopted last year. It's our 2040 plan, looks at 20 years of growth and development within the city. It's our planning document and our roadmap for future development. It takes a look aspirationally as to what we want to see in the city itself. Within the comprehensive plan, we have different land use categories on our future land use map. It's very similar to our zoning map. And so the map that I'm showing you up here, up in the upper left, is our land use map out of the code. What this map signifies is what we want to be over the next 20 years, as opposed to what is the legal zoning today. The comprehensive plan and the zoning map work together in that standpoint. So as we look at this map today, the area in the purple is designated what's termed mixed use. Under mixed use in our comprehensive plan, it gives guidance and direction on the type of things that would be there. And mixed use would be commercial, residential, goes through some items related to the different types of uses, uses of space, that type of thing. It also goes through what's termed density. Density is essentially the number of housing units per acre. Within this mixed-use district itself, there is not a provision to go as high as of a density as is being proposed, in particular on this UBC North parcel that we have. And so we're asking the council, or asking the Planning Commission, to look at a change to create a new district that would accommodate that. Now, this mixed-use high-density district, the terminology, the land uses, what's allowed within it is identical to the mixed-use district already in the plan. The only difference is it allows up to 85 units per acre. The existing one does not allow it that high. You may ask, why the heck would we want to have 85 units an acre on a property in downtown Hastings? That sounds pretty dense. When you look at Hastings and you look at the property itself, when you have a very small property and you've got a 4-story building, a 4 to 5-story building, which is being proposed here, it is going to have a lot higher density because you don't have the open space to spread that density out. So you take a look at a project here, which is probably about 85 units. You take a look at a project like Art Space, which is 37, but it has a parking lot and open space and green space on it. That one is more along lines of 30 units an acre. So the difference is when you have a small property, that density figure has an effect that's much larger. And so that's what we're asking tonight on the first step, is to create this district, this mixed-use, high-density district. And the next one would be the designation of properties. Down here, we have a little more detail as to what we're looking at. This area to the south here is the project that is being proposed by NJS Development Stencil Group for the 85-unit building. This includes the UBC North building, the parking lot to the north here. We're also including in here the Depot Park and parking lot. This is the Red Rock Corridor parking lot. This is purely for, I would call it aspirational purposes. There is no plan that we have right now to develop that property. We are the owner. But as you look into the future, that's a possibility of that it could develop in that fashion. So we're looking at creating this district to apply to both of those properties there. When you take a look at what could be built on the Depot Park property itself, on the parking lot, it would be at that same density of 85 units an acre. You'd yield at most 154 units on there, plus you'd have a 47-foot story limit, 4-story limit within that area, which would limit it more. So you wouldn't be seeing anything of a giant skyscraper coming into downtown Hastings. We would have those modifiers on it. So that is what is before you tonight in the amendments. 1, the creation of this district, and 2, the designation of properties. This is a public hearing. You can open it up at this time. We did send a notification out to neighboring property owners. I did have one phone conversation with an individual who, in the area that questioned why we were doing this, moved into a house, didn't want to see the change. So I do bring that to your attention. Otherwise, we can open the public hearing. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, John. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Seeing there's nobody here present, do we have anybody on Zoom?
Mr. Chair, I'm looking at my Zoom screen right now, and I do not see anyone who wishes to speak. I will note that Nate Stencil of Stencil Group is in the audience here. Specifically, this is not, this covers more than his property itself, but he is in attendance.
Okay. And is he wishing to speak?
I don't think so at this time.
Okay, okay. Seeing that no one wishes to speak, we'll close the public hearing. Open it up to commissioners. Any questions, comments? Commissioner Tyken, did you? Oh, no, it's okay. I haven't. Commissioner Halberg?
Question for John. John, the Stencil property, how many acres is that roughly, as well as the Depot Park?
Yeah, Commissioner, the Depot Park property, that whole parking lot's about 1.8 acres. The Stencil property, I think, is a little over an acre, 1.1, 1.2.
Okay, thanks, John.
Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Peters?
I just had a couple of questions. One was, looking at the description of this being like commercial and residential combined vertically in the same building, does that mean that the commercial is always the lower part and the residential above? And is that spelled out anywhere? So I was just thinking about for like safety of the people who live there, I would wanna make sure that there's no general public access.
And Commissioner, within the land use guidance, within the comprehensive plan, we use that in developing our ordinances. So under our ordinances for zoning, under the C4 district, the downtown core district, we generally have the commercial on the first floor. I don't think there's any prohibition for upper floors on it, but from a practicality standpoint, I don't think you're likely to see that.
Another question? Oh, was that, oh, I thought you had a couple questions. All right.
Well, I guess like the only question was like, if, you know, if someone was living there and wanted to like create a business out of the residential area, they wouldn't be able to do that. Even if it's designated like mixed use, someone could start operating a business out of their apartment or whatever it would be if it was in an upper floor. I just wanted to make sure that it was gonna be clearly commercial and then residential.
Yeah, with the intent of the apartment project moving forward by Mr. Stencil, that would be purely residential on that. So I don't believe there would be any commercial use within that building whatsoever. So usually the building owner will have certain regulations on the use inside for tenants.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Peters. Commissioners, any other comments, questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion for the creation of the mixed-use high residential land use category. I'm assuming we want to do this in two, or we want to do these together?
Commissioners, you may make a motion with both of the amendments as one of you are comfortable doing so.
We can combine it then, if that's fine. And the designation of the property to the MUHR, mixed-use high residential, so.
Okay, Commissioner Romans,
There we go.
do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Commissioner Tyken, second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next on the agenda, another public hearing. This one is City of Hastings City Code Amendment 2021-42, definition of family. Staff report by John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Planning Commissioners. Tonight, we're looking at a code amendment to our zoning code for the definition of family. And you may be asking, why are we doing such a thing here? The definition of family has certain applications beyond what we would typically consider important for family, really dealing with zoning uses and zoning density within properties themselves. Right now, under our zoning code, we have a very generalized definition. It states, a family is a group of individuals living under one roof, period. There is not any sort of limit as to the number of people that can be within a structure. In certain circumstances that come up, we see buildings that come in as boarding houses or renting out rooms to individuals that have the number of individuals within a home much larger than really the home was designed to operate under, and can really cause a strain on the number of vehicles and the number of individuals within a structure itself. So the reason we're going about this is really for that purpose. It's not really to get into what a definition of a family would be, but more from a zoning and regulatory standpoint. In developing the rules for the proposed change tonight, we had our city attorney do some research on other neighboring and like communities to see how they regulate this item. Most of these cities would regulate it in a couple of different ways. One is they had a straight definition of a number of people that had some sort of relation. These would be people that were related by blood, marriage, guardianship, adoption, that group. So people that are really family, there's the connection there. And then there's term of unrelated individuals that fall outside of that. And that's where the number gets in there as far as the limit. What we're proposing tonight is a limit of 4 unrelated people within that unit. So the number of people that would be related by blood, marriage, guardianship, adoption, unrelated, you have as many as you want there. We're not touching that. But we are putting a limit on the number of unrelated people living together in a single housekeeping unit. So a housekeeping unit would be a facility that has shared facilities, common household, common cooking, kitchen. There's a relationship between those. That's what we're proposing tonight. So the definition that we have for family here is very consistent with our neighboring communities. So this is a public hearing. You may open it at this time, or I can stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Again, there's nobody present in the chambers. John, anyone on Zoom?
No one in the chambers, Mr. Chair, but I do have someone via Zoom.
Okay, perfect.
Call him, and I got Bryce coming in here.
John, was that Bryce? Did you say? Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
And Bryce, you are in the meeting. If you want to unmute, you are all set.
Okay, Bryce, if you can state your name and address for us? Bryce, can you hold on for one moment? We just need to
Adjust the volume.
increase the audio real quick in here for you,
Yeah.
so we can hear you.
Oh, we can. Now you're gonna ask me to do that. I may have to. Presentation volume. Does that do anything different there? Bryce, can you say something?
Yeah, how about now?
Perfect.
That is perfect. We can hear you clear. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so, just looking at the proposed ordinance amendment, to me, reading through it, obviously I see the increased number of requests to rent out individual rooms, the increased activity in vehicles beyond what is normally expected within residential neighborhoods. And that as far as the change is not to overregulate the changing nature of what constitutes a family, but to limit the number of unrelated individuals. I guess to me, that rationale is kind of circular. Limiting the number of unrelated individuals is still kind of legislating to be what would constitute a family. I guess my background, and from my standpoint, I know a lot of younger people. I'm, under 30 myself. A lot of younger people kind of group together, whatever, people that I know, to make rent that might not necessarily be related, right? So to me, I guess as far as this goes, the nuisances that are coming up, I'm not exactly sure 100% background or anything of requests or complaints or whatever. I guess using, to me, the family definition to dictate the number of people that can live in a certain dwelling is a little heavy-handed and kind of opening up a whole other can of worms, if that makes sense. So, how are we going to enforce that, whatever? I guess I would rather see something along the lines of something in fire code, building code. I'm sure there are something that could come up with that's based on square footage, egress, bedrooms, number of fixtures, whatever, something a little more scientific, I guess, because control maximum occupancy restrictions in safety and building codes, kind of what I referenced earlier, or just increase the number above and beyond 4, is kind of what they were saying, to better allow for non-traditional family types, especially in this day and age where, you know, the standard family size is smaller, but people are living in different arrangements a lot more. Yeah, I guess just to me, this feels a little overly restricted of people's personal lives within their own homes and what they can do with their own property. I think there's probably a better way to go about, you know, limiting any potential safety or health or nuisance problems that are coming up as the impetus for this, so.
Okay, thanks, Bryce. I appreciate it. John, do we have anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, there's nobody else in the audience.
Okay, if there's nobody else wish to speak, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And we'll go ahead and open it up for comments and questions. We will get you a copy. John, we have some people who didn't get some.
Okay. Who didn't get a copy? A lot of people. Okay.
Okay, based on that,
Let me. What do we do? See if we can put this on the screen somehow. That might be easiest. Let's see. All right. I'm going to call up the packet. It might just be a moment so that we can share the amendment on the screen here. That didn't work. I thought you could do it from here, but I guess not. And there we go. Here is the amendment itself, which is this, hopefully. Let's see if I can. A little bit larger. So the definition we have under code right now says a group of individuals living under one roof. The proposal would be to strike that language and have the definition read, an individual or two or more persons related by blood, marriage, guardianship, adoption. So this is what we term the group of related individuals and how that's defined. That's unlimited. Or a group of not more than 4 persons not so related. So if you have people that are unrelated, the total number of those individuals within a household would be limited to 4 unrelated individuals. These individuals are living together as a single housekeeping unit, using common household, common cooking, and kitchen facilities. So this has, bedrooms, shared kitchen, common cooking facilities. So these are not individual units with their own, which would be separated and be their own unit. So that is what's proposed within the amendment.
okay, thanks, John. Just quick, can I show of hands, how many people here haven't read this before tonight? So you haven't read it either, right? Okay, so 3 of us? Okay. I think given that, I think probably the best thing to do would make a motion to table it until the next meeting, so that we can make sure we get hard copies to the 3 who haven't looked at it before
Okay.
tonight. So I'm gonna make a motion to table it.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question? So
Sure.
when we come back, what issue are we trying to solve with this?
The issue we're trying to solve is the propensity that we're having with homes that may be with larger number of bedrooms that are being rented out to, as individual housing units, but rooms that may have 2, 3 individuals within there. You times that by, 4 or 5 bedrooms, you're dealing with, 12 to 15 people within a household that was never intended to be that many people from a vehicle standpoint and just from a use standpoint.
So, and I'm fine continuing this, I just want to get I have some thoughts in my head. We don't have any ordinances around how many cars we can park?
We do.
And that doesn't solve this problem?
We have it per unit, unfortunately, not per room. So if we would have a house with 5 bedrooms in it, we have parking that would be required for 2 spaces for that house, regardless of how many bedrooms or whatnot would be there. So in that type of situation, we don't.
And if I could just.
Justin, go ahead.
Thank you. About 5 or 6 years ago, we brought this up to the planning commission, because we were having problems with this. At the time, we weren't using it, the definition of family to try to regulate it. We were gonna try to use, the zoning ordinance, and the use of, boarding house. And, some of the same questions were brought up. What are we trying to fix? And we talked about some of the nuisances that we're getting calls on daily from people that have to live next to these facilities. And, at the time, the planning commission denied the proposal, saying that they thought working through code enforcement would work. But let's say they have too many cars on the property, all they do is they just move them to the street. And that creates a lot of other problems with the neighborhood. There's issues with the streets not getting plowed. There's issues with them moving to the streets when we get code enforcement down there. And then a couple weeks later, they'll start, parking back at the property. And they're, parking over the grass, all the, in the driveway, blocking people so they don't get their mail when they're parking in the street. There's also other issues with having so many people at a house. There's a lot of police activity required, a lot of police calls and issues with the people living there. I don't know of any. There might be some circumstances where there's young people trying to save some money and a few friends living together, but the problems we're seeing are much beyond that. And in the parts of town where we have a lot of these issues, it's in the R2 district, the older parts of town in the core of the city. And a lot of those properties are eligible to be used as a duplex. And so if they are, and they put in a second kitchen, even the 4 individuals that are totally unrelated, they can have double of that, even under this proposal. So that's 8 in a normal, small, Rambler or, older 1,200 square foot house. If it's considered a duplex under this even, they could have 8 individuals. I think we really do need to have some hard requirement on a total maximum of individuals. It's still gonna have issues that we're gonna have to deal with through code enforcement. But just dealing with them all by code enforcement is not possible, because a lot of these issues are never gonna go away unless something changes with the ordinance.
All right, thanks, Justin. For those that have not read it, are you comfortable continuing with this? You're fine with it? Okay, good. All right, then I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay?
Okay, and we'll go ahead and continue discussion as per normal. So Commissioner Peters, go ahead.
How are children counted? So when it says an individual or 2 or more persons related by blood, marriage, guardianship, when we have that maximum of 4, how are children counted in that? And the question is, like, if there are 2, you know, single-parent families maybe living under the same roof with a couple of children each, they could easily go over that 4-person requirement. And I just wouldn't want any action that we have to have unintended consequences for families. I'm just wondering if children are counted in this, or if this individuals, if it's adults.
Commissioner, it's a good question. I would presume that persons there's not any age related to that, so it could include children in that.
So I'm,
Maskey, go ahead.
so I'm assuming the comment "or more persons related by blood" would be the children, is what it means.
Right, and so, yeah, correct. So really, you're not going to likely have a situation in which you're going to have children living in a household that do not have a relationship with the individuals living there, and that's unlimited. So I don't think there'd be any unintended consequences on that aspect of it, because you could still have those individuals that are a family unit with an unlimited number of kids. It's just when you get to a situation in which you have the number of unrelated. So if you had perhaps 5 unrelated individuals living in a household with kids, it would come into question at that point under this amendment. But if you had less than that, it wouldn't.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Maskey. I think if I'm not right, if I'm not missing it, just basically the intent is to clean up the language and essentially identify what a family is and make it consistent with what we're seeing in surrounding communities. And it's not out of the ordinary for a community to have a limit, you know, on non-family members living in one dwelling. I mean, you could have a 4-bedroom house, and before you know it, you could have 2 people per bedroom. You got 3 in the basement, and now you got 7 cars parked outside. You got 4 on the street, 3 in the driveway. And yeah, it can become a mess pretty quick. So I can understand why the city wants to just shore up the language. I don't think we're going to go through retroactively and start, going through every neighborhood and saying, so how many people are in your home? But this gives us a concrete foundation and a definition going forward, should we get any more requests and so forth down the road, and to take care of any, like Justin said earlier, to at least be able to take care of any existing issues, or going forward, make sure we clearly define that so that we're not running into conflicts when we're trying to enforce these types of ordinances and so forth, if that's what I'm hearing.
Yes, it really comes from the unintended consequences of having a lot of people within a house, and what sort of impact that has within a neighborhood.
Okay, thanks, John. Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Romans?
John, just 2 quick questions. I definitely see where you're coming from on this, but I just wanted to clarify, unrelated means completely unrelated from everybody in that group, not, there's 3 people related and 1 person not related to them, so that it's completely unrelated to everybody.
Completely unrelated to everyone, correct.
Okay. And then how is that going to be enforced eventually?
It's a very good question there. I mean, I don't think that we have the staff or really the desire to go in and knock on doors and check on folks. That's certainly not the intent of this. But when we have situations that come up in which there happens to be signs of a lot of people living in a household, vehicles, whatnot, this could be used as a mechanism to check on that. When we have a situation in which a house comes up for sale and we're being asked a question, can we be used for X, Y, and Z reasons, we could say this is the limitation on it.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I just kind of want, I know you're trying to kind of define what single-family home means that way. I just wanted to know the context, necessarily what you can do about it. Even if we change the language, what does it actually mean?
Sure.
Those are good points, so I think that's all I had. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks, Commissioner Romans. Commissioners, any other? Commissioner Tyken?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Boy, I really get the intent behind this, is I've had friends that have lived next door to houses like this. And I get the city's intention behind this, but I really struggle with this language. It doesn't seem very scientific to me, which would lead to how do we enforce it? How do you know if somebody's a cousin? How do you know if they're blood related? That just seems like an enforcement nightmare to me. If I have a family with 8 kids, so there's 10 of us living in this house, what's the difference between that and renting out to 5 of my buddies? I get it, I like to do something about it, but personally, I don't like this language. It's too ambiguous and it's too, it'd be really hard to prove if people are related or not. And going back to the children, what if I have 2, we'll call them families under this, they're blood related, living in a house, they each have 3, 4 kids. How do we count, what's the math there? Because they're both individually related, but you see where I'm struggling with that, and, thank you, Commissioner Peters, for bringing that up, is if we have 2 families living in a house, and they're just friends, how do we enforce that, and how do we count those people? So, I think it was Bryce, I didn't get his last name. Is it a square footage thing? Is it a lot size thing? What does that look like? I don't know. I think, to me, that would be a better use of, or better way to enforce this.
If I can ask a follow-up question. So you're going to not allow a family of related people to live in a house because the square footage is large enough?
And no matter what we come up with, it's probably not going to be the perfect system. I'm just saying that if we are applying it to unrelated people and related people, to me, there's injustice there, because if I'm related and I have 8 kids, what's the difference between that? Or I adopt, 4 16-year-olds and I buy them a car. What's the difference between that and the intent behind the 4, non-related people living in the house together? I get it, and I'm not up here to kind of rewrite the code. I'm just struggling with the code as it's being presented, is how do we enforce it, and how many situations we're going to run into where it's really not doing what we want it to do. So I would like to do something about it. I just personally struggle with this language.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Commissioner Taken. Appreciate it. Commissioner Matzke?
Do we currently have ordinances that regulate persons in duplexes? Do we have something that says a house can be a duplex, and these are the ordinances that are affected with ordinances, or is that something that doesn't exist right now? And it might help us clarify whether this is needed or not at all, because it seems it's kind of a people that are staying, as rented guests or rented, is that, do we have anything in the books right now for that? I'm confused.
Yeah, Commissioner, I'm trying to follow the question here. Are you asking about duplex regulations?
Yes.
Okay, right now, within our zoning code, our R2 district, for example, allows for single-family homes and duplexes. They both have minimum lot sizes within there. We have other zoning districts that allow for, townhomes and apartments, and they have a specific lot size or units, a lot size typically on that to regulate how much can go into a project or into a building. But as far as the number of people that go into a unit itself, no, we do not.
So is it something that we could fix going that route rather than limiting the family size if we went in and we went into that? Or
Yeah, Commissioner, I think it probably accomplishes the same thing from my mind, because the term what we use within our zoning code is family, single family, 2-family, multiple families. So the term family has some significance. And since the term family right now under our zoning code allows an unlimited number of people within a unit's typically is something with its own kitchen facility and a number of bedrooms, and they share that within a common household. So that's what a unit is. And our code has a definition of family when we talk about how many people, how many units can be there. So it's 1 family, 2 family, 3 family, whatnot. So this is really where we would regulate this number of people within the unit itself.
So we're kind of coming back to that
Yeah.
definition of family then? Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner Massey. Commissioner Romans?
John, just one quick question too on it. You know, since we're trying to worry about mostly a large number of people renting, splitting the rent or whatever in place, couldn't you regulate this a little bit by how many people can share rent or mortgage in a single facility, single household?
I think that might become a challenge on that one because now we have the ability to regulate land use as far as the number, but once we talk about the qualities of how those individuals are in a home, either whether they rent or own, I don't think that's something that we can delve into.
Okay, so it's not something that you could say, a single unit can only be split up by 6 different, renters, essentially. Since it's not, your concern is that, not necessarily families or groups of individuals this way, but somebody turning a, 3-bedroom house into, well, you're gonna pay me $100 a month to stay here, and we're gonna have 3 people in each bedroom, that type of concern.
Yeah, I think anytime, Commissioner, you get into the subject where you have an ordinance that's based upon the ownership status, that you're gonna run into some jeopardy. So when you're talking specifically rentals in this case, and how it's split up.
I'd like to add, that's kind of exactly what this does. If they're a family that's related by blood or by law or any other items, they're likely not going to be paying rent. If we're calling them a family and they have no relation whatsoever, it's pretty obvious that they're paying their own rent.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense that way. I'm just trying to look at it as trying to eliminate as many unintended consequences, but I'm sure that one has plenty along its path as well, so,
Sure.
thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner Romans. Commissioner Hubbard?
John, where does this leave like sober housing or homes that do foster care that are more regulated by the state and the county? If there's a house with 5 individuals that are not related, there's one person, say I'm a single person, and I have 4 people that live there that I foster for. Where does that fit in to this definition of family for regulation's sake when I have to adhere to the state and to the county?
Sure. I think from a foster situation, we have the term adoption in there. I would construe that to be similar to that. So from a number of children standpoint, I don't think it would have an effect, that would be considered as part of those related individuals. When you're talking about sober houses, there will be a limitation on that, because you would have, presuming that people are unrelated, which I think is predominantly the case when you have people within sober housing, it would place a limit on that.
Okay, because the foster isn't just kids. There are adults that have special needs, developmental dysfunction, traumatic brain injury, what have you, that live in a group home setting. So that's where I kind of question the line of thinking. We're kind of limiting and kind of eliminating that possibility of housing for people, services that people need.
Yeah, and there's certain state regulations that go through group home situations, and the language that they have in there may supersede what we have presently.
Okay, thanks, John.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Hubbard. I think foster really falls mostly closely under guardianship. I mean, at that point, you're a legal guardian for that individual. You've been assigned to them as per the state or a county or whatever it is. They're a guardian for that particular time frame that they're living with you, so they're not gonna come under scrutiny or anything like that. And besides, those types of situations probably wouldn't draw much attention or complaints or nuisances anyway, which is what this is really intended to prevent. So I'm looking at it more of what this is intended to prevent. It's not intended to prevent people from being foster parents or guardians or adopting, kids or whatever, what have you. It's literally just trying to prevent future issues with nuisances, 10 vehicles, one house, 3 bedrooms, 3 people per bedroom, unrelated, each paying rent. That becomes a nuisance property for the other homeowners surrounding them, and without any kind of structure, without any kind of foundation, there's very little the city can do to address those issues unless this is cleaned up, and it is consistent with the other communities surrounding us, right? So, I understand where it's coming from. I'm not too worried about the subcategories of, that people were mentioning tonight. They're all good comments and they're all good questions, but I think they're all covered under most of this. Commissioner Peters. I'm sorry, I can't see your light. There we go. Thanks.
That's okay. I guess it's just a comment. I think that it's really hard because defining family for the use of code, I do understand the need to do that because the word family is being used across the ordinances, but at the same time, the definition that we have up, that's up on this screen is a very traditional view of what family is, and I don't know, or I don't think that it necessarily is inclusive of the idea of family as being just people who have it could be 2 groups of people who have like the relationship like a family and they act as a family, but it may not fit, that definition. And I wouldn't want our city to adopt a definition of family that's not consistent with being inclusive, that's possibly not consistent with meeting the goals of providing, affordable housing. So that's where I struggle, and I don't know what the definition should be, but when I look up here, it looks like a very traditional definition that doesn't include the concept of family. That's just more about, just relationships between people. And I do understand what this is trying to get at. I do understand like renting out a room in your house, but I'm concerned about this definition not including, someone's view of family that isn't a traditional view.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Peters. Commissioners, any other comments, questions? Seeing none, if anyone wants to make a motion, I'll entertain one either way. All right, if no one's gonna make a motion, I'll make the motion. I'll make the motion to approve the City Code Amendment 2021-42- definition of family, City of Hastings.
I'll second.
Commissioner King, second. Okay, further discussion? Seeing none? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
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 Okay, I need a roll. Did you get all the noes and the ayes?
Yeah, let me see, on the ayes, I have Commissioner Messina, Commissioner Matsky, was Commissioner King part of that too? Okay, was there anyone else in the aye camp? No, okay, so that's 3 ayes, and then the remaining were nays, is that correct, with Commissioner Peters, Commissioner Romans, Commissioner Hallberg, and Commissioner Tyken? Okay, that was a solid note, so
Okay.
recommendation for denial on a 3-4 vote will go to the planning, or go to the city council at the November 15th meeting for first reading. They'll order a public hearing that would be held on December 6th.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, John. Other actions, other business.
Other actions, business at this point. We will have a meeting on the 22nd. We've got the comprehensive plan amendment again coming in here. This one for a MUSA extension that's gonna be a precursor to an annexation. So, got about 70 acres on Highway 316, just south of South Pines. Received an application for annexation and comprehensive plan amendment. It's kind of an oddity with the comprehensive plan amendment. We're not changing the land use district. What they're proposing is consistent with it. But anytime that we amend what we term our urban service boundary, our sewer boundary, to include more area from from the township that we annexed, we need to amend our comprehensive plan. I term it as putting in place a comprehensive plan, but disagreement I have with my council. So we will be going through that at the 22nd meeting. I know that one for sure.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
Sorry that there's more. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll take meeting, try to get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, Commissioner Tyken, a second.
Second.